Yes, but he has some heritage. All of us have various forms of heritage. We come from different places. But Mr. Speaker, in the debate, and I wish that you can encourage members, this singling out of Chinese investment, Indian investment, American investment, or whatever investment, or African, I think, Mr. Speaker, it is unhelpful. It does not send the right signal, because we live in a globalized environment. We live in an environment where, in fact, the competition to attract investment, in fact, is very, very intensive. And the fact that due to our country, due to the enabling environment that the PPP civic government has created, we've been able to attract here. And due to all the people of Guyana, I think is something positive and something that we must celebrate. And I want, so Mr. Speaker, let us ensure that in this regard, that we value development, we value investment, large and small. But the question was asked, what support are we providing to small miners and to small operators in the sector? A very important question too. And I wish to report, Mr. Speaker, that this large and medium scale miners, they will have what you call an investment development agreement, whereby they're provided with various forms of concessions, duty-free in terms of machinery, equipment, spares, and so forth. And for the small and medium scale operators who may not have an IDA, they themselves, through a process working with the GGMC, will be qualified in terms for exemption for ATV, excavators, bulldozers, and other machinery that are used within the mining industry, including mercury-free technology in this regard, and various spares and equipment that are necessary. These are the types of incentives. In fact, if we look at last year, concessions granted to small operators, small miners, there are 150 excavators, 6 tractors, 190 ATVs, various pickups, number of trucks, and so forth. And currently, Mr. Speaker, I wish to report that the Minister of Finance is currently examining the appropriate regulations whereby we can provide our small miners too, because currently they qualify for single cab pickup and vehicle for transportation. But recognizing that we have female miners and we need people to be transported not only comfortably but safely, we are looking in terms of having double cab pickup and even car to qualify in some regards for our small miners. So I wanted briefly, Mr. Speaker, to address the issue in terms of what support. But another support too that we provide, Mr. Speaker, is dealing with the issue in terms of infrastructure and road. And the Honourable Member, Mr. Joe Harmon, would have spoken to the issue of the GGMC, the Ministry of Natural Resources, working with the Ministry of Public Works, local government involved in road work. But then the other Honourable Member, on the other hand, Dr. Rup Narayan, complained that the road situation, road access for miners are inadequate. And Mr. Speaker, for a number of years, especially with the boom of the mining industry, particularly gold, the GGMC working with the GGDMA, in fact, collaborate and carry out and execute a number of road maintenance and road building projects. Also, the GGMC would provide resources to the Ministry of Public Works in executing some of those programs. And so it is a collaborative effort. And we want to ensure that the miners feel the direct support too, especially our small miners or hard-working miners, that they feel the direct support in this regard. And so, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to make it absolutely clear that there is support, and we continue to look in terms of providing more resources, meaningful resources in this regard. Also, in terms of dealing with the unstable gold prices that we've had, especially cushioning for small miners, there have been a number of measures discussed at various levels, working with the mining community in terms of looking at forms of support. And I wanted to reinforce that particular issue. Also, Mr. Speaker, the prospects for oil and gas too. That continues to be on the horizon. And in fact,
before you proceed to that subject, we have an extension?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I propose that the Honorable Minister be given 15 minutes to continue his presentation.
Very well.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. The prospects for oil and gas, as we know, we have Repsol and Tullow, two companies in a joint venture. They are currently actively pursuing work, hoping to engage in exploration in the Kanuku block. Exxon is also in the process of making a key decision and in fact has already established its office in Guyana, again to engage in exploration activity in the Stabroek block. CGX2 is engaged in a number of preparatory activities to have renewed exploration both in the Corentyne and Demerara, as well as the onshore. Mr. Speaker, as you know, we had the unfortunate development whereby Anadarko, having one its seismic vessel forcibly removed by a Venezuelan Navy, and that itself, too, I wish to report, has set back our programs in some regard. But, Mr. Speaker, it points that what we require in Guyana is unity. What we require in Guyana is togetherness on this particular issue. Because I wish to refer to another issue where just recently our Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs have had to, through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we've had to protest. And sometimes the statements that we make and the mixed signals that we send in our country, they embolden others outside. And whereby we had to withdraw our participation in an oil and gas conference that Suriname was proposing to hold in June. And why we withdrew? They were circulating the documents, and as part of the Suriname map, they had the New River Triangle area included. And Mr. Speaker, I point to that because we have to constantly and consistently and stridently take a unified stand on our territory, but also the development of our natural resources and development of all possibilities within our 83,000 square miles. We must not in any way suggest we are surrendering or we are, as it were, being ambivalent on this particular issue. But Mr. Speaker, as we talk about developing our natural resources, it is also about striking the balance. Striking the balance and ensuring that we respond to the accompanying social as well as environmental challenges that come with an expanding natural resources of extractive industry. And particular emphasis has been placed on strict environmental monitoring and enforcement. And what we have done, Mr. Speaker, in addition to collaborating with our international partners, be CI, WWF, working with the KfW out of Germany, and all the UNDP and the World Bank, and a range of other partners, we've also looked at developing our national regulatory institutions. Take, for instance, the EPA, in ensuring that we boost its capacity, even the environmental division within the GGMC, in ensuring that there is compliance, working with communities, particularly Amerindian communities, in terms of training environmental monitors, so that we can have constant monitoring, particularly an area of particular concern in terms of water pollution, and ensuring that we manage that and we do constant monitoring and we take necessary action if we find that we have a situation that requires attention. Also, Mr. Speaker, the Protected Areas Commission, we're moving in terms of ensuring that the protected areas, the areas that have been defined by statute, that we have the various management plans developed so that these communities can also be responsive and fulfill our international commitment that we've made. So far, close to 10% of our territory has been declared protected areas, and we want to ensure that they are managed in such a way that, again, that we continue to be outstanding in this regard. A particular issue that was raised was what is our commitment in terms of REDD+ and the low carbon development strategy. And I'm quite sure honourable members would have noted the Minister of Finance's reference to the low carbon development strategy, which provides the guide in terms of our developmental pathway in the near, medium and long term. Just recently, Mr. Speaker, the International Panel on Climate Change released its report, which again painted a very ominous picture, an ominous reality in fact, of what is taking place as regard to climate and what we need to do. And that is why we see recently this hurried effort at the global level, hoping that next year we can in fact have a very serious and a very comprehensive climate treaty in this regard. And we do hope as part of that there will be due recognition and significance given to the REDD+ initiative that Guyana has been championing and leading in this regard. And our commitment, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding what is taking place and what is happening within the sector. Yes, we've seen an increase in deforestation as a result of mining. And the question was asked whether or not we are going to be continuing our engagement with the Kingdom of Norway, and the answer to that is yes. Currently, we're involved in discussions on the fourth payment. Already, Guyana, we've received close to US $150 million in this particular area, and we're currently in discussion, and we hope to proceed in further discussions in this regard. In the last quarter this year, we will commence the implementation of another REDD+ initiative, working with the World Bank. That is the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility, which is valued close to $3.8 million US. This again is working with the communities, because whilst we're the only country, the first country to develop a national monitoring, reporting and verification system, we're also trying to reinforce and build that through communities and working with communities so that we can have accurate and much more realistic reporting. So I wish to assure this Honourable Assembly, as reference was made by the Honourable Minister in terms of commitment to the low carbon development strategy, it is also, we are committed to REDD+. And Mr. Speaker, we have just recently established to assist in terms of monitoring forests for deforestation as well as land degradation. We now have real-time satellite imagery, whereby we can pinpoint, Mr. Speaker, I know I'm not supposed to be showing placards or pictures, but I just wanted as for aid of reference, where at any one time we can track where dredges are, where there's mining activity, the specific location. We can also point to where there are hotspots of immediate deforestation. And this type of info, Mr. Speaker, is very, very important, because we can tell you every mining activity that is causing deforestation that's more than 10 hectares. Why it is important? We will be able to track where there's illegal mining, and we've already started a program of aerial surveillance, working with the Guyana Defence Force, utilizing their air assets. But not only the Guyana Defence Force, Mr. Speaker, we are talking to the private aircraft operators, where we're going to fit in them monitoring equipment, and so that in their flights in and out, we'll be able to review footage and see what is also taking place. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we are putting more boots on the ground. We're building 15 more mining stations, in addition to the 35 forestry stations that we have. Already 4 being completed. So I speak to that, to those efforts, among others, because it shows our commitment to REDD+, to managing. Whilst we are very much interested and we are promoting an expanding extractive industry, we want that to be done in a sustainable as well as in a responsible way, so that we can continue to be in a shining light. And the comment is right, also dealing with the issue of social issues, trafficking in persons, dealing with issues wherever they occur, where you have children, we find them in mining camps for one reason or another, not necessarily there for labor or other antisocial activities. It is working with the Ministry of Human Services. The Minister of Labour has just been able to table for the first time, we have occupational health and safety regulations. So it is also dealing with those other issues, Mr. Speaker, and dealing with those challenges. So the centrality of the low carbon development strategy to Guyana's development and to what we're doing, not only in the natural resources and environment sector, but also to our overall development thrust, remains very prominent in this regard. So, Mr. Speaker, what we see taking place in this particular sector, as in other sectors of our economy, is about job creation. I refer to several projects which will see hundreds of new jobs being created. And I've heard the observation and the criticism made, without any justification, by several members of the opposition, that this budget did not speak or respond to the issue of job creation and opportunities. But I wish to point the honourable members to the number of projects that we have, but also the budget 2014 serving as a catalyst for economic transformation as well as growth. Last night, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of economic transformation, a criticism was leveled stating that under the PPP Civic there has been no transformation. We've not been able to restructure as a board economy over these past 22 years. And the Minister of Finance's office has been able to supply some data which I'm quite sure he'll be able to share with all honourable members. But I'll just cite a few, Mr. Speaker. The GDP, the size of the GDP when the PPP Civic came into office was just over 3.7 billion. 37 billion, sorry. Today, the size of that GDP is in excess of 359 billion. But it's not only the sheer size of the economy that we're talking about, but let's look at the structure of the economy, what is taking place. In 1992, Mr. Speaker, if we had the contribution of agriculture, fishing was in the vicinity of 33%. Today, that contribution is at just over 19% of GDP. In 1992, Mr. Speaker, sugar accounted for 20% of GDP. Because of the growth and the expansion and the restructuring and the need for us to diversify and to create many pillars of growth, sugar today accounts to in the vicinity of 3.9% of GDP. Rice, Mr. Speaker, then was 2.8%. We've seen a growth of 5.4%. But let us look in terms of mining and quarrying. In 1992, it was just about 8.9%. Today, as was reported by the Minister of Finance, gold alone accounts for 9% of GDP, while mining and quarrying is about 12.4%. But then, Mr. Speaker, the story gets interesting in terms of what we're doing to restructure and diversify. Services, in terms of its contribution to GDP in 1992, was about 26%. And out of that 26%, government services accounted for 15%. Today, Mr. Speaker, services as a share of GDP is 65%. And in fact, there is, if you look in terms of public administration with the being of government, it's just a mere 7%. But if we look in terms of the new activities, there are sectors which did not even exist then. Take, for instance, ICT. That sector today accounts to close to 6.9% of GDP. I make those references, Mr. Speaker, because when we talk about 2014 budget, it is not just another year, another budget. It is about an unfolding story. It is about unfolding development. And it is about transforming Guyana, transforming our country for new opportunities, diversification, and ensuring that we remain resilient, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, every budget of the PPP Civic can be seen as a building block of a new society, of a prosperous society, of a stable society. But Mr. Speaker, if we're going to make full use and full opportunities in terms of realizing the potential of this building block, what we require in our country, Mr. Speaker, is a renaissance of the Guyanese spirit. A renaissance of the Guyanese spirit. Because thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this renaissance, Mr. Speaker, would require us to develop a new political culture. A new political culture. And this new political culture is not the burden should not be only the onus of one side of this house. But building this new political culture requires all of us working together in terms of building cooperation, but also the issue of genuine trust. And Mr. Speaker, you had a front row seat recently to the issue of this matter of trust and the seeking cooperation, and I refer to your involvement to broker some sort of accord, some sort of understanding on the coming to an agreement on the anti-money laundering bill, Mr. Speaker. And you have had a front row seat to show the efforts that were made and what led. I will not stand here and distribute the blame in this regard, but Mr. Speaker, it requires genuine cooperation. It requires trust in this regard, Mr. Speaker. And that is why also there's talk by different members. And Mr. Joe Harmon in his presentation, Mr. Speaker, referred Lieutenant Colonel retired Joe Harmon, honourable member.
Yes, honourable.
He referred to the PPPC as sometimes acting as a schoolyard bully, Mr. Speaker, and sometimes making the claim that we're contemptuous, well, Mr. Speaker, and that we're not doing enough for cooperation. And then the honourable member last night said that we should provide more information in Gaisuko, more information on what we're doing in Amaila Falls. And there are members here, Mr. Speaker, who will recall the invitation by His Excellency and a number of meetings that were had and presented all the relevant documentation. In fact, the head of the Presidential Secretariat, in fact, he would describe it as the government undressing itself for the opposition, figuratively speaking, but undressing itself, doing and providing all the information. And we've seen this happen from time to time. Honourable Member Dr. Rupnarayan, all the information they're providing on Amaila. Honourable Member Mr. Ben took Mr. Harmon and others, flew them to the road in Amaila, Dagan Airport. And we saw the favourable comments, Mr. Speaker. The number of sessions that were held in Marriott on the airport project, Mr. Speaker. And what happened? We turned up here, Mr. Speaker, and we saw the true picture. So if we're talking about cooperation, if we're talking about trust, if we're talking about us working together, it requires a new political culture. It requires cooperation. It requires genuine trust. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we all recognize that we need a new political architecture, a new governance architecture. But this new governance architecture, Mr. Speaker, will not come about if we act in a callous, if we act in a way that does not do good to our country's development, that does not take into account the future of this country, Mr. Speaker. And it requires us taking important small steps for us to achieve what we're seeking to build and develop. I do, Mr. Speaker, believe that there are genuine and well-meaning Guyanese on the opposite side. They're genuine and well-meaning Guyanese, Mr. Speaker, and it is in our duty. But, Mr. Speaker, we must ensure that we inspire people, to do good, that we inspire people to build our country, that we inspire people to live in unity. And let us not conspire, Mr. Speaker, to cause division. Let us not conspire to sabotage. Let us not conspire to underdevelop, because we will be doing the people who we represent an injustice. Mr. Speaker, I say to the honourable member, and Mr. Harmon, Mr. Joe Harmon in his presentation said that he went out to the communities and he looked into the eyes of his constituents. I'm happy he did that. But Mr. Speaker, it is not only about looking into the eyes of Guyanese, it is also, Mr. Speaker, it is about warming their hearts. It is also about lifting their hopes and giving them, Mr. Speaker, that confidence and giving them some sort of future so that they can want to live and build our country. Mr. Speaker, we're meeting here at this time, at a very auspicious time too, where we have our Christian brothers and sisters observing the Lenten season, and as well our Hindu brothers and sisters observing Navratri. And I do hope, Mr. Speaker, that we will make full use of this auspicious occasion and this auspicious time to show the true Guyanese spirit, to bring about this renaissance that we're calling about in this regard, so that we can inspire, Mr. Speaker, our people to build a better Guyana, and we can inspire greatness out of our land. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude my presentation, this unique 10th Parliament has so far can be described as a situation where we have a troika of bitterness. But Mr. Speaker, it is not too late. It is not too late. This 2014 budget, Mr. Speaker, we can convert this troika of bitterness into a troika of togetherness. And on that note, Mr. Speaker, I wish to commend the 2014 budget to the National Assembly.
Now, to address us.